My name is Miranda Jones, and at 36 years old, I stood in the hushed solemnity of St. Ethelberg's Chapel, the scent of lilies clinging heavy in the air. It was my mother Evelina's funeral, a day already steeped in raw grief, yet one I'd been dreading for an entirely different reason. 6 long years had passed since my sister, Serafina Vorian, 35, had ripped my perfect Novana Haven life apart, stealing Jules Thornton, 41, my fiancé, right from under my nose. I hadn't seen either of them since the day I found them in his office at the Viridian Apex, their betrayal shattering everything. My engagement, a dream proposed at the Cygnus Harborview, had been reduced to a cruel joke. I'd fled to Arlen Peak, rebuilding my shattered world brick by agonizing brick. News of their lavish wedding, of the Cinosor diamond sparkling on Serena's finger, had once felt like a final, crushing blow. But not anymore. The chapel doors creaked open, and there they were. Serena, dazzling in black, the infamous diamond catching the faint light. Julian, beside her, a phantom of the charismatic man I once knew. Instead of the wave of fury I expected, a strange, profound calm washed over me. She had no idea who was truly waiting for her, not just in the pews, but in the quiet, undeniable shift of my own life. The chapel, St. Ethelberg's, was a place steeped in generations of Jones family history. Its stained glass windows, usually vibrant with morning light, now cast muted, somber hues onto the polished pews. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and sorrow, felt heavy, pressing down on everyone. But for me, Miranda Jones, the weight was twofold. It wasn't just the profound ache of losing Evelina, my mother, my anchor, but the sharp, anticipated jolt of seeing them. And then they were there. The chapel doors, oak and heavy, swung inward with a low groan, revealing Serafina Vorian, my sister, and Jules Thornton, my ex-fiancé. 6 years. 6 years of silence, of carefully constructed distance, of a life painstakingly rebuilt in Arlen Peak, thousands of miles from the ghosts of Novana Haven. Serena, as always, was a vision, even in the severe cut of her black dress. Her blonde hair, usually a cascade of meticulously styled waves, was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon, emphasizing the sharp angles of her striking features. And there it was, glinting subtly even in the chapel's subdued light, the Cinosor diamond, an obscenely large, perfectly cut stone that sat like a beacon on her left hand. It was the ring Jules had given her, the one that should have been mine, the one that had become a bitter symbol of their stolen happiness and my shattered dreams. Jules stood beside her, a hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He was still handsome, still possessed that effortless charm that could disarm anyone. His dark suit, impeccably tailored, hung on his broad frame, an expensive shell around a hollow core. He hadn't aged much, save for a few faint lines etched around his eyes, perhaps from the relentless pursuit of superficiality. He looked exactly as I remembered, yet utterly foreign. The man I had loved, the man who had proposed to me on one knee at the Cygnus Harborview, the luxury restaurant that had once symbolized the pinnacle of my perfect life, was now a stranger, a charlatan. I braced myself, for the familiar surge of fury, the cold, gripping clutch of betrayal that had defined so many of my nights in the immediate aftermath. But it didn't come. Instead, a strange, profound calm washed over me, a quiet, almost serene understanding. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, not truly. It was something deeper, something earned through years of painstaking healing. It was the calm of knowing that I was no longer the girl they had broken. I was a woman, forged in fire, standing on solid ground. And Serena, for all her outward glamour and the glittering diamond on her finger, had no idea who was truly waiting for her. Not just me, standing resolute in the third pew, but the quiet, undeniable shift in the very fabric of my own life. A shift that had brought me true happiness, a happiness that could never be stolen. My life in Novana Haven before the implosion had seemed, to an outsider, utterly perfect. I was 30 then, on the cusp of everything. My career as a senior architect at a renowned firm was thriving. My apartment overlooking the bustling harbor was a dream. And then there was Julian. He was a tech magnate, a whirlwind of charisma and ambition, with a smile that promised the world and eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. He was the kind of man who commanded a room, who made you feel like you were the only person in it when he spoke to you. When he proposed at the Cygnus Harbor View, the city lights shimmering on the water outside the panoramic windows, I truly believed I had it all. He slipped the luminous solitaire, a delicate, perfectly cut diamond, onto my finger, and I felt a sense of completion, of destiny fulfilled. Evelina, my mother, had been my closest confidant through it all. She was a woman of quiet wisdom, her warm eyes missing nothing, her comforting presence a balm to any worry. Even then, she'd offered subtle warnings, gentle nudges about Serena's long-standing envy. Serena always had a way of wanting what you had, Miranda, she'd mused one afternoon over tea, her gaze drifting to a framed photo of Serena and me as children, our arms wrapped around each other, feigning sisterly affection. Be careful where you place your trust, darling. Some desires run deeper than family ties. I'd brushed it off, of course. My sister? Envious of me. It seemed preposterous. Serena was my best friend, my maid of honor. I'd even picked out a stunning emerald green dress for her, a color that perfectly complemented her blonde hair and striking features. I wanted her to shine with me. I wanted her to share in my joy. My naivety, in hindsight, was staggering. The shifts began subtly. Julian, who had always been meticulously punctual, began working later, citing urgent projects at the Viridian Apex, his gleaming office building downtown. He'd be distant, distracted, his phone constantly buzzing with calls he'd taken hushed tones in the next room. I, caught up in the blissful haze of wedding planning and the exciting buzz of my own demanding career, dismissed them as the unavoidable pressures of his high-powered world. I was busy too, immersed in complex architectural designs for the new downtown library, pulling my own late nights. We were two driven people, I reasoned, navigating a demanding professional landscape. The truth, when it finally hit, wasn't a gradual dawning, but a brutal, instantaneous shattering. It was a Tuesday, a day etched into my memory with the precision of a laser. Julian had forgotten his presentation notes for a crucial board meeting. He called me, frantic, asking me to drop them off at his office. He'd be in a meeting, he said, and I should just leave them with his assistant. But his assistant was out sick. I walked into the Viridian Apex, a building I knew well from countless visits, its modern, sleek lobby usually bustling, but quiet now in the late afternoon. I took the express elevator to his floor, the familiar corporate hum a prelude to the silence that would follow. His office door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the dimly lit hallway. I pushed it open, a casual smile on my face, ready to playfully scold him for his forgetfulness. The smile froze, then crumbled. They were there. Jules Thornton, my fiancé, and Serafina Vorian, my sister, locked in an embrace that left no room for doubt. Serena's back was to me, her blonde hair a vivid splash against Jules's dark suit. His hands were tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, their mouths fused. The air in the opulent office, usually filled with the scent of leather and ambition, now reeked of deceit. My world tilted on its axis, a silent scream tearing through my chest that no one heard. The presentation notes slipped from my numb fingers, scattering across the polished floor like fallen leaves. They broke apart, Serena spinning around, her face a mask of shock, then guilt, then a flicker of defiance. Jules's eyes, those eyes that had once promised me forever, were wide with a deer in headlights terror. He tried to speak, to explain, to justify, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? The truth was undeniable, stark, brutal. The lumina solitaire, my engagement ring, suddenly felt like a lead weight on my finger, a cruel mockery of all I believed. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked out, each step a deliberate effort against the monumental weight of betrayal. The elevator ride down was a blur, the city outside the window spinning. I remember hailing a cab, giving my apartment address, then staring out the window, seeing nothing, feeling everything. Months of deceit. That was the phrase that echoed in my mind. Not just that moment, but the countless dinners, the shared laughter, the whispered sweet nothings, all while this insidious betrayal festered beneath the surface. Every late night at the office, every urgent call, every moment of his distractedness, replayed in a sickening loop, each detail a fresh stab. The pain was physical, a constant ache behind my ribs, a hollow pit in my stomach. My father, Thaddeus Jones, a man of strong opinions and an even stronger sense of family honor, was livid. He fumed, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and profound disappointment. "That man," he'd roared, pacing our living room like a caged lion, "and your sister! They'll pay for this, Miranda. They will absolutely pay." He wanted to sue, to expose them, to drag their names through the mud. But I was too broken, too raw. Evelina, true to her nature, became my anchor. She didn't rage. She simply held me, listened, and quietly began to navigate the wreckage. Canceling the caterers, the florist, the venue, the Cygnus Harborview, where our dream had begun. Each call was a fresh reminder, a tiny shard of glass twisting in the wound. But Evelina handled it with quiet grace, shielding me from the worst of it. She sat with me for hours, letting me talk, letting me cry, letting me simply exist in the raw grief. She never said, "I told you so," though she had every right. She just offered comfort, a steady hand in my storm. I hit rock bottom. The days blurred into weeks. The apartment, once my sanctuary, became a cage. I lost weight, stopped answering calls, let the dust gather. Despair was a heavy cloak, suffocating me, blurring the edges of reality. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, devoid of purpose, of joy, of any semblance of who I used to be. The future, once a brightly painted canvas, was now a vast, terrifying void. The idea of moving came to me in a moment of desperate clarity, a sudden, fierce urge to escape the suffocating memories of Nirvana Haven. I needed a new landscape, a new sky, a new identity unburdened by their betrayal. Denver, Arelon Peak specifically, called to me. It was far, geographically and emotionally, a sprawling, diverse city nestled against the Rockies, promising a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. Packing up my life was cathartic, each box a shedding of the past. The news of their lavish wedding, Julian's ring, the sinister diamond, now firmly on Serima's finger, reached me through a mutual acquaintance, a well-meaning but ultimately insensitive text message. It was a glossy photo from a society magazine, Serena radiant, Julian beaming, the diamond a blinding flash. It felt like a final, crushing blow, a cruel mockery of my shattered dreams. I remember staring at the image, tears streaming down my face, a sob tearing through me. But then something shifted, a flicker, then a spark. Not of revenge, not yet, but of a fierce, unyielding decision. I would reclaim my happiness, not for them, not to spite them, but for me. I would build a life so full, so authentic, so genuinely joyful that their stolen moment would pale in comparison. Slowly, painstakingly, I rebuilt. Arelon Peak was a revelation. The crisp mountain air, the endless blue skies, the sheer vastness of the landscape seemed to breathe life back into my dormant soul. I poured myself into my work, taking on ambitious projects, pushing my creative boundaries. My career flourished, my designs earning recognition, my confidence slowly returning like a hesitant sunrise. It was through work, through a collaborative project on a new eco-friendly high-rise in the heart of downtown Arelon Peak, that I met Arthur Sterlingwork. He was a brilliant structural engineer with a quiet intensity and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. Dark hair perpetually falling across his brow, a patient demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He was everything Julian wasn't: genuine, stable, utterly lacking in superficiality. Our love story was a quiet triumph, a slow, gentle unfolding. He never pushed, never rushed. He listened. He listened when I spoke of Nirvana Haven, of the betrayal, of the lingering shadows. He listened even when I couldn't speak, when the panic attacks would seize me, sudden and suffocating, remnants of the trauma. He'd simply hold my hand, his presence a steady anchor. He helped me navigate the shattered trust, not by forcing me to open up, but by consistently proving himself trustworthy day after day, through small gestures and unwavering support. He understood that healing wasn't linear, that sometimes the past would ambush me, but he never flinched. He celebrated my small victories, soothed my anxieties, and slowly, painstakingly, helped me to believe in love again, in a love that was real, grounded, and profoundly safe. The true cosmic justice, as I came to see it, unfolded years later, after Arthur and I were already deeply in love, after the scars had faded to faint lines, no longer defining me. We were at a charity gala in Arelon Peak, a rather dull affair, when Arthur was pulled aside by a colleague. I overheard snippets of their conversation, names I recognized: Sterling Brook Acquisitions, Thornton Global. My blood ran cold. I discreetly moved closer. Arthur, it turned out, was not just a brilliant engineer. He was also a shrewd, quietly formidable businessman. Years ago, before he met me, his company, Sterling Brook Holdings, had been locked in a fierce business rivalry with Julian's fledgling tech empire, Thornton Global. Julian, in his characteristic arrogance, had tried to aggressively acquire a key patent that Sterling Brook Holdings also coveted, believing his charisma and deeper pockets would prevail. What Julian hadn't accounted for was Arthur's meticulous planning, his strategic patience, and his uncanny ability to anticipate an opponent's moves. Arthur had decisively outmaneuvered Julian, not with flashy theatrics, but with quiet precision, effectively crippling Thornton Global's access to a crucial market segment and setting them back years. Julian's company never quite recovered its initial momentum after that, always struggling to regain lost ground, a fact Julian had, predictably, buried beneath layers of carefully curated public image. When Arthur later told me the full story over a late-night cup of tea, his hand gently tracing patterns on my arm, I felt a strange mix of vindication and awe. He had never mentioned it, never gloated, never even hinted at his past dealings with Julian. It was just a business deal, a rivalry won. But for me, it was everything. It was proof that the universe, in its own mysterious way, had a ledger, and some debts were paid in the most unexpected currencies. It wasn't an act of revenge, not on Arthur's part, but it certainly felt like cosmic justice. He had won, quietly, decisively, against the man who had nearly destroyed me, years before he even knew I existed. Evelina's terminal illness brought me back to Nirvana Haven. The news had hit me like a physical blow, even with the distance and the years of healing. She had been my rock, my steadfast guide, and the thought of a world without her warmth, her wisdom, was unbearable. I flew back immediately, Arthur by my side, his quiet strength a constant comfort. Her final wish, whispered to me in the hushed sanctity of her hospital room, was simple yet profound. "My darlings," she'd rasped, her voice thin but firm, her eyes, though clouded with pain, still clear with love. "I want my daughters to find peace with each other. Forgive Miranda, and Serena, seek true happiness, not just the illusion of it." It was a plea, a legacy she wanted to leave, a final act of maternal love that sought to mend what had been broken. The funeral itself at St. Ethelberg's Chapel was a crucible of emotions. My raw grief for Evelina was intertwined with the gnawing tension of Serena's presence and the unspoken weight of my father's health. Thaddeus Jones, my father, usually so robust, seemed shrunken, his grief manifesting in a quiet, almost fragile demeanor that was deeply unsettling. Midway through the eulogy, delivered by our family pastor, Thaddeus swayed, his hand clutching his chest. A collective gasp went through the chapel. My heart seized. Serena, without a word, was beside him in an instant, her arm steadying him, her face pale with concern. I moved forward too, reaching for him, my hand finding Serena's as we both supported our father, guiding him gently to a pew. It was a fleeting moment, born of crisis, but in that shared concern, that instinctive act of unity, a fragile bridge seemed to form between us, silently, almost imperceptibly. Later, after the reception, after the last mourner had left, Serena and I found ourselves alone in my childhood home, the silence echoing with Evelina's absence. My father had gone to rest, exhausted. Serena looked utterly spent, the glamour stripped away, revealing a profound weariness. She sat on the old floral sofa, the one Evelina had loved, and finally, after 6 years, she spoke. Her confession was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, painful unraveling. "Miranda," she began, her voice hoarse, her gaze fixed on her hands, the sinister diamonds still glittering, but now seeming to mock her. "I'm miserable." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regret. She confessed how Julian's charm had faded almost immediately after their wedding. How the man who had seemed so magnetic, so full of life, had revealed himself to be utterly controlling, obsessive about his image, and, shockingly, financially irresponsible. His tech empire was built on a house of cards, a constant struggle to maintain a luxurious facade while debts mounted. He was perpetually borrowing, investing in risky ventures that inevitably imploded, always seeking new money to prop up the illusion. The lavish parties, the designer clothes, the opulent lifestyle, it was all a desperate performance, funded by a rapidly dwindling inheritance and a mountain of credit. He controlled everything, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My friendships, my spending, even what I wore. He said it was for our image. He drained what little I had left, claiming it was investments that would pay off big time. It never did. He's ruined us, Miranda. We're on the brink of losing everything. That ring, she lifted her hand, the diamond flashing. It's a cage, a very expensive, very lonely cage. Her eyes, once so full of a fierce competitive light, were now clouded with shame and despair. I thought he was my ticket to everything I wanted. I thought he'd give me the life I envied you for. But it was just an empty promise, a lie. And I deserve it, don't I? She looked at me then, raw and vulnerable, the mask finally shattered. I didn't answer immediately. The surge of anger, though dulled by years, still threatened to rise. But seeing her, truly seeing her, broken and exposed, something shifted. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about my mother's last wish. It was about the shared grief that now enveloped us, an invisible force pulling us closer than any blood tie ever had. Evelina's legacy wasn't just a will or old photographs. It was the quiet strength she had instilled in me, the capacity for compassion, even in the face of profound hurt. That night, we talked for hours, not as rivals, but as sisters, two women scarred by the same man, albeit in different ways. We shared memories of Evelina, tales of her quiet strength, her infectious laughter, her unwavering love. The conversation was halting at first, punctuated by tears, but slowly, a fragile bridge, built not on forgiveness of the past, but on the shared weight of grief and the promise of a different future, began to form. It was a tentative connection, but it was there. My life with Arthur Sterlingbrook flourished in Aralyn Peak. Our love deepened with each passing year, built on a foundation of mutual respect, unwavering support, and an authentic joy that was utterly unlike the superficial glitter of my past. Arthur's quiet triumph in business translated into a stable, secure home life, filled with genuine affection and shared dreams. We bought a beautiful home in the foothills, its large windows framing the majestic Rockies, a constant reminder of the expansive new life I had built. My career continued to soar, culminating in a partnership at my firm. And then, the ultimate joy, the news of our child. It was a quiet, profound happiness, a miracle, a testament to the life I had so painstakingly rebuilt. We chose names, decorated a nursery, and spoke of the future with a boundless optimism I once thought lost forever. It was a future free from the shadows of the past, illuminated by the light of a true, unwavering love. Serena embarked on her difficult path. She stayed in Novana Haven, facing the fallout of Julian's financial recklessness, slowly disentangling herself from his web of deceit. It wasn't easy. There were legal battles, public humiliations, the stripping away of every pretense of wealth and status. She started working again, quietly, rebuilding her own life, brick by painful brick. We talked sometimes, not frequently, but enough to know that she was trying, truly trying, to find her own authentic path, far from the allure of stolen diamonds and false promises. The betrayal nearly destroyed me. It brought me to my knees, stripped me bare, and forced me to confront the deepest corners of my despair. But paradoxically, it was that very destruction that led me to a more authentic, more fulfilling life. It led me to Aralyn Peak, to a career I truly loved, and most importantly, to Arthur, the kindest, most genuine man I had ever known. The luminous solitaire, the ring Julian had given me, was long gone, discarded as a painful relic. But the Sinosaur diamond, the one on Serena's finger, had become a different kind of symbol. A warning, a reminder of the cost of envy and the emptiness of superficiality. Scars remain, of course. The memory of that moment in the Viridian apex, the sting of deceit, the phantom ache of a broken heart. They are part of my story, etched into the fabric of who I am. But they no longer define me. They are merely reminders of a journey that led me, unexpectedly, to a life richer, deeper, and more authentically joyful than I could ever have imagined. The scent of lilies still brought a pang of grief for my mother, but it was now mingled with the quiet, profound peace of a life truly lived, a family truly forged, and a future blooming with promise. That future, the one blooming with promise, had begun to unfurl with a gentle, undeniable rhythm. It was a rhythm of life, of growth, of quiet anticipation. The news of our child, Arthur's and mine, had been delivered in a hushed whisper, a fragile hope blossoming into a vibrant certainty. The moment the doctor confirmed it, a tiny, fluttering heartbeat on the ultrasound screen, Arthur had squeezed my hand so tightly I thought my bones would fuse with his. His eyes, usually so calm and composed, were alight with a mixture of awe and unrestrained joy. It was a silent, powerful affirmation of our love, a testament to the life we had built from the ashes of my past. My pregnancy unfolded with its own unique blend of wonder and the delightfully mundane. There were the initial weeks of morning sickness, a cruel joke of nature that left me feeling perpetually seasick, followed by the boundless energy of the second trimester. Arthur, ever the patient and supportive partner, navigated my shifting moods and strange cravings with an unflagging good humor that made even the most challenging days bearable. He'd bring me lukewarm ginger ale, rub my aching back, and listen with rapt attention as I recounted the day's fetal movements, each tiny flutter a profound connection. We spent hours poring over baby names, a surprisingly delightful and often hilarious debate that usually ended with us collapsing in laughter, unable to agree on anything more complicated than baby Sterlingbrook. Our home in the Aralon Peak foothills, nestled amongst ponderosa pines and aspens, became a haven of preparation. We'd bought it together a few years prior, a sprawling ranch-style house with enormous windows that framed the majestic, snow-capped Rockies. It wasn't a showpiece like Julian's ostentatious penthouse had been. It was warm, inviting, filled with books, art, and the comfortable clutter of a life genuinely lived. The scent of fresh pine and baking bread often hung in the air, a stark contrast to the sterile, ambition-tinged aroma of my Novana Haven apartment. Now, one of the sunniest rooms, overlooking a small private garden, was being transformed into a nursery. We painted the walls a soft, calming shade of sage green, and Arthur, with meticulous care, assembled the crib, his brow furrowed in concentration, a playful grimace on his face as he wrestled with incomprehensible instructions. Watching him, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep into my bones, that this man, this gentle, brilliant, quietly triumphant man, was everything I had ever truly needed, and more. He was my secure base, my unshakable foundation, the quiet counterpoint to the chaotic symphony of my past. My career, far from flowing down, seemed to thrive with this new phase of my life. My firm, impressed by my dedication and innovative designs, had offered me a partnership, a recognition of years of tireless work and creative vision. I was leading the charge on a significant urban renewal project in downtown Aralyn Peak, transforming a dilapidated industrial zone into a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly cultural hub. The challenges were immense, but I approached them with a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the stability and happiness Arthur brought into my life. Every line I drew, every concept I sketched, felt imbued with a deeper meaning, a contribution not just to a city, but to the future I was now building, brick by precious brick. It was a profound satisfaction to see tangible results of my efforts, to know that I was shaping beautiful, functional spaces for others to live and thrive in. This was a different kind of fulfillment than the fleeting allure of corporate power Julian chased. It was a quieter, more enduring sense of accomplishment. Serena's path, meanwhile, was, as I'd anticipated, arduous. Our conversation after the funeral had opened a door, but it was a door to a long, winding road, not a shortcut to instant reconciliation. She remained in Novana Haven, facing the full, brutal force of Julian's financial implosion. The lavish facade he had so meticulously constructed had not merely crumbled, it had detonated. Reports in the local society pages, once filled with glowing accounts of their power couple status, now detailed the swift and ugly proceedings of bankruptcy, the repossession of their various assets, the public auction of their art collection, and the forced sale of their opulent penthouse in the Viridian apex. It was a humiliating, public dismantling of the very illusion she had so desperately chased. I heard snippets from our father, Thaddeus, who, after his health scare at the funeral, had become a little more open, a little softer around the edges. He'd call me, ostensibly to check on Arthur and me, but inevitably the conversation would drift to Serena. He'd report on her progress, his voice a complex mix of anger at Julian and a grudging, almost pained respect for his daughter's resilience. Serena had taken a job, he told me, a quiet, administrative role in a small, unassuming firm downtown. No more charity galas, no more designer clothes, no more glittering social circles. She had moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of Novana Haven, far from the affluent neighborhoods she once frequented. The Sinister diamond, that grotesque symbol of her ambition and my betrayal, was, she confessed to me in a later, hesitant phone call, long gone. She'd sold it, she said, not for profit, but to pay off a fraction of the debts Julian had left her with. A bitter, ironic sacrifice. It was heavier than any stone should be, Miranda, she admitted, her voice hollow. It was never a gift. It was a burden. Our own conversations were still tentative, marked by a cautious respect rather than a return to the easy camaraderie of childhood. We talked about Evelina, sharing anecdotes, finding comfort in our collective grief. We spoke about our father, his improving health, and his newfound quietness, almost a humility that had softened his previously rigid demeanor. He seemed to have finally understood the fragile nature of life, the fleetingness of material possessions, and the enduring power of family, however fractured. He had even, to my astonishment, visited Serena in her new, humble apartment, a gesture that spoke volumes of his shifting priorities. There was no grand cinematic moment of forgiveness between Serena and me, no tearful embrace that erased 6 years of pain. Instead, it was a gradual, almost imperceptible softening. It was in the shared silence on the phone when one of us remembered something about Mom, a quiet understanding passing between us. It was in the rare, awkward coffee meetings where we discussed mundane things, carefully avoiding the past, but recognizing the effort each of us was making to simply be present. She acknowledged her mistakes, not with flowery apologies, but with a quiet, consistent effort to rebuild her life with integrity. I, in turn, offered not absolution, but space, and a measured willingness to believe in her capacity for change. The bridge between us was fragile, yes, but it was being slowly, painstakingly reinforced, one tentative step at a time. It was a bridge not to the past, but to a different kind of future, one where we could coexist, perhaps even care for each other, without the toxic weight of old resentments. As my due date approached, a profound sense of peace settled over me, deeper and more abiding than anything I had ever known. The lingering shadows of betrayal had receded, replaced by the radiant light of my present. Julian Thorne, the name that once conjured such bitterness, now felt distant, almost irrelevant. His fall from grace, the public unraveling of his carefully constructed illusion, was a testament to the hollowness of his pursuits. He had chased wealth and status, stolen a fiancé and a sister's trust, only to find himself bankrupt in every sense of the word. His story was a cautionary tale, not a source of lingering pain. I realized that my revenge, the cosmic justice Arthur had unwittingly delivered, wasn't about his downfall, but about my own ascent. It wasn't about making him suffer, but about finding my own joy, independent of his existence. The journey had been long, marked by deep valleys of despair and arduous climbs towards healing. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, yes. It had stripped away my illusions, shattered my trust, and forced me to rebuild my entire sense of self. But in that crucible of pain, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. I learned the invaluable lesson of discernment, the difference between superficial charm and genuine kindness. I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to the quiet warnings, to value authenticity above all else. And in the process, I discovered Arthur, a love so profound and unwavering that eclipsed every past hurt. Now, as I cradled my growing belly, feeling the gentle stirrings of the life within me, I knew I had arrived. I was Miranda Jones, standing on the precipice of motherhood, surrounded by a love that was real, a home that was true, and a future brimming with possibility. The scars remained, faint lines on the tapestry of my life, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of resilience, of growth, of a journey from brokenness to wholeness. They no longer defined me. They merely told a part of my story, a story that was now, finally, truly my own. The scent of lilies would forever carry the bittersweet memory of Evelina, my wise, loving mother. But that scent was now interwoven with the fresh, hopeful fragrance of a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of love, healing, and the quiet, triumphant act of reclaiming one's own happiness. My new life was not merely good, it was profoundly, beautifully, undeniably real. The quiet triumph of my new life wasn't a sudden explosion, but a gentle, steady unfolding, like the bloom of a desert flower after a long drought. Every morning, waking beside Arthur felt like a quiet miracle. His presence was a balm, a constant source of reassurance. There were no grand pronouncements of love, no performative gestures like the ones Julian had once orchestrated. Instead, it was in the way Arthur, then 43, made coffee exactly how I liked it, strong and black, before I even opened my eyes. It was in the way his hand found mine automatically when we walked, a comfortable, unspoken connection. It was in the endless, patient conversations we had about everything and nothing, from the intricacies of my urban renewal project to the absurdities of a particularly bad reality show. He listened, truly listened, with an attentiveness that had been absent in my previous relationships. He didn't just hear my words, he heard the unspoken anxieties, the subtle joys, the nuances of my soul. Our home, nestled in the embrace of Aralon Peak, was a living testament to this new reality. The scent of fresh pine, carried on the crisp mountain air, often mingled with the aroma of Arthur's experimental sourdough bread or the comforting notes of a slow-cooked meal simmering on the stove. It was a home built on shared values, not on a foundation of impressing others. The large windows, which had initially drawn me to the house, now seemed to frame not just the majestic Rockies, but also the unfolding tableau of our lives. I watched the seasons change from those windows, the vibrant greens of summer giving way to the fiery golds and reds of autumn, then the hushed white blanket of winter, and finally, the tender reawakening of spring. Each cycle mirrored the journey I had taken, from barrenness to rebirth. The nursery, now almost complete, was a sanctuary of soft light and anticipation. The sage-green walls seemed to breathe tranquility, and the handmade mobile, a gift from Arthur's aunt, with its tiny wooden constellations, spun gently in the faint breeze from the open window. Arthur had finished assembling the crib, after a comical struggle with a particularly obtuse diagram, and now it stood proudly in the corner, awaiting its tiny occupant. We'd spent an entire Saturday arranging the miniature clothes in the dresser drawers, marveling at the impossibly small socks, laughing at the impracticality of certain frilly outfits. Every tiny garment, every soft blanket, was infused with the quiet joy of expectation. It was an intimacy I hadn't known I was missing, this shared creation of a future, a life, together. My pregnancy had become a journey of self-discovery, each week revealing new facets of my physical and emotional landscape. The initial fatigue and nausea, which Arthur had diligently combated with endless cups of ginger tea and gentle back rubs, had given way to a surge of energy that surprised even me. I found myself tackling my work with renewed vigor, the urban renewal project in downtown Aralon Peak taking on an almost symbolic meaning. I wasn't just transforming a dilapidated industrial zone, I was helping to revitalize a community, to create spaces where new families could grow, where lives could flourish. It was a tangible expression of the hope and renewal that now defined my own existence. The long hours, once a source of quiet dread in my Novana Haven life, now felt purposeful, imbued with a deeper significance. I was building, creating, contributing, not for external validation, but for the inherent satisfaction of bringing something beautiful and functional into being. My firm had indeed offered me a partnership, a recognition that felt truly earned, not granted through some fleeting social connection or a well-placed dinner party. It was the culmination of years of quiet dedication, of honing my craft, of letting my designs speak for themselves. The responsibilities were immense, but I approached them with a clear mind and a steady hand, fortified by the unshakable foundation Arthur provided. He was my sounding board, my quiet champion, the one who celebrated every small victory and offered solace during the inevitable challenges. We often discussed my projects over dinner. His insights, gleaned from his own successful business ventures, often illuminating a path I hadn't considered. His quiet strength was a perfect complement to my creative drive. The contrast with Julian, then 41 world, couldn't have been starker. While my life was expanding, deepening, and growing more authentic, his was publicly imploding. The society pages of Novana Haven, which once breathlessly reported on his every move, his latest acquisition, his lavish parties, now chronicled his spectacular downfall with a morbid fascination. The details, filtered through Thaddeus's 60s increasingly frequent phone calls, were grim. Julian's charismatic deals were revealed to be built on a house of cards, a complex web of inflated assets, risky ventures, and outright financial mismanagement. The opulent penthouse in the Viridian apex, once a symbol of his supposed success and the scene of my greatest heartbreak, had been seized, its contents auctioned off to the highest bidders. His extensive art collection, once showcased as a mark of his cultured taste, was dispersed, its value nowhere near what he had claimed. The sinister diamond, that symbol of stolen happiness, was long gone, sold by Serena to cover a fraction of the debts Julian had left her with. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had chased the illusion of wealth, the superficial sparkle, only to lose everything. My cosmic justice wasn't about his suffering, but about the profound, undeniable difference between a life built on sand and one built on bedrock. Serena's, then 35 journey, as Thaddeus recounted, was a slow, painful crawl out of the wreckage. She had indeed taken an administrative job, a stark contrast to her previous life of leisurely pursuits and curated social appearances. Thaddeus, in his gruff but increasingly gentle way, described her new apartment. Small, but clean, Miranda. At least it's her own. It was a quiet place on the outskirts of Novana Haven, far from the bustling downtown or the exclusive neighborhoods she once frequented. She walked to work, took the bus sometimes, and learned to cook for herself. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by sensible, comfortable attire. The glittering social circles had vanished, replaced by the quiet camaraderie of colleagues in a small, unassuming firm. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for Serena, who had lived so long in the shadow of Julian's fabricated reality, real was the hardest, most necessary lesson of all. Our phone calls, initially hesitant and punctuated by long silences, began to lengthen. We talked about Evelina's 60s, her wisdom, her quiet strength. We shared stories, some sad, some funny, finding comfort in the collective memory of our mother. It was through these conversations that Serena began to truly articulate the depth of her misery with Julian, not as a means to gain sympathy, but as a genuine recounting of her experience. His charm, she admitted, had indeed faded, replaced by an insidious control, a constant need for validation that bled into every aspect of their lives. He dictated her appearance, her friends, her opinions. He presented a perfect facade to the world, but behind closed doors, he was demanding, emotionally manipulative, and increasingly reckless with money. She had been trapped, gilded in a cage of his making, desperate to maintain the illusion. The Cynosure diamond, she had told me, wasn't just heavy because of its monetary value, it was heavy with the weight of her regret, her complicity, her lost self. Selling it had been a physical act of liberation, a severing of ties to a past she no longer wanted to inhabit. There were still moments of awkwardness, of course. The shared history was too raw, the wounds too deep, for a quick and easy reconciliation. But the bridge, once fractured, was slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt. It wasn't the bridge of childhood innocence, nor the one of forced familial obligation. It was a new bridge, forged from shared grief, from a mutual understanding of suffering, and from a tentative, cautious hope for a different kind of connection. We met for coffee sometimes, not in the trendy cafes of downtown, but in quiet, neighborhood spots, discussing our work, our father's improving health, the changing seasons. We avoided the past, but the unspoken acknowledgement of it hung in the air, a silent promise of effort. Serena didn't apologize with grand gestures, but with consistent, quiet attempts to be present, to be honest, to rebuild her integrity brick by painful brick. I, in turn, offered her space, a listening ear, and a willingness to believe in her capacity for genuine change, however slow. It wasn't a fragile bridge, yes, but it was holding, strengthened by the quiet determination of two sisters trying to find their way back to each other, not as they were, but as they could be. Thaddeus, surprisingly, had become a quiet advocate for Serena. His health scare at Evelina's funeral had truly shaken him, forcing him to confront the fragility of life and the enduring importance of family. He visited Serena in her new apartment, bringing her groceries, offering gruff advice. He spoke of her with a new, almost pained respect, acknowledging her resilience in the face of such adversity. His previously rigid demeanor had softened, replaced by a quiet humility that was both unexpected and deeply moving. He called me more often, not just to check on Arthur and me, but to share snippets of Serena's progress, his voice laced with a complex mix of lingering disappointment and burgeoning pride. He seemed to have shed the obsession with outward appearances that had once defined him, replaced by a profound understanding of the inner fortitude required to rebuild a life. As my due date drew closer, the anticipation became almost palpable. Our lives, Arthur's and mine, were a symphony of quiet routines and profound moments. We spent evenings walking the trails near our home, hand in hand, discussing names, dreams, and the endless possibilities of parenthood. The crisp mountain air, the scent of pine and damp earth, filled me with a sense of groundedness I had never experienced in Nirvana Haven's bustling affluence. This was true luxury, I realized, the freedom to be myself, surrounded by love, building a life on my own terms, not dictated by societal expectations or the fleeting desires of others. The lingering shadows of Julian Thorne had faded into insignificance. He was a distant memory, a cautionary tale, but no longer a source of pain or resentment. His public humiliation, his financial ruin, was not my victory. My victory was in the profound peace that had settled over me, the deep, abiding love I shared with Arthur, the anticipation of our child, and the quiet rebuilding of a fractured family. My revenge wasn't about his downfall, it was about my own ascent, my own reclamation of joy and authenticity. It was about choosing a life of integrity over illusion, substance over superficiality. The journey from that moment in the Viridian apex, the brutal discovery of betrayal, to this quiet, radiant present had been long and arduous. It had forced me to confront my own naivety, to dismantle my assumptions about love and trust, and to rebuild myself from the ground up. In that crucible of pain, I had forged a resilience I never knew I possessed. I learned to discern genuine kindness from superficial charm, to listen to the quiet warnings of my intuition, and to value character above all else. And in doing so, I had found Arthur Stirlingbrook, a man whose love was so unwavering, so profoundly real, that it transcended every past hurt, every lingering scar. He was not a replacement for what I had lost. He was an entirely new, infinitely more valuable foundation for a life I truly wanted. Now, as I sat in the sun-drenched nursery, a hand resting gently on my swollen belly, feeling the rhythmic, reassuring flutter of life within me, I knew I had arrived. I was Miranda Jones, a woman transformed, standing on the precipice of motherhood, surrounded by a love that was real, a home that was true, and a future brimming with quiet, beautiful possibility. The scars remained, of course, faint lines on the tapestry of my life. They no longer signified wounds, but served as gentle reminders of resilience, of growth, of a profound journey from brokenness to wholeness. They no longer defined me. They merely told a part of my story, a story that was now, finally, truly my own. The scent of lilies would forever carry the bittersweet memory of Evelina Jones, my wise, loving mother. Her quiet strength and unwavering support having been my anchor through the darkest storms. But that scent was now intertwined with the fresh, hopeful fragrance of a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of love, healing, and the quiet, triumphant act of reclaiming one's own happiness. It was a life built on truth, on love, on the quiet, deep satisfaction of being truly, completely myself. And it was just beginning.